All right, next up is the dollar. And you know how people always say the dollar isn't backed by anything? It's a fiat currency. You know, well, maybe that's not exactly true. Okay, so you know how the dollar used to be backed by something like gold, and you could exchange your dollars for the thing? Well, then, over time, that sort of collapsed in two different stages. But history aside, um, we switched to more of a debt based monetary system. But I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think the dollar is backed by something. It's definitely backed by something. Probably, I mean, you could say other fiat currencies were backed by something too, but it's it's this same thing. It's backed by slaves. Yeah, that's what it's backed by. It's backed by slaves because so it used to be that you would get something in exchange for your money. Well, now what you're doing is you're buying debt. Well, what happens? Debt of what? Debt of people. Well, what's a debt that you're born into and you can't opt out of, and that your a percentage of your labor goes into paying whether you want to or not. That's some kind of slavery. That's You can call that serfdom or you can call it indentured servitude, but the thing is you're born into it. So you cannot refuse to pay those taxes. So the dollar is backed by the people you have the power to tax. That's what it really comes down to. The dollar is backed by the people you have the power to tax. And as long as you can tax those people, you own the product of their labor. You own some fraction of their labor, and their labor is some productive activity. There's real world productive activity to that. But you, in a sense, own those people. And so I guess when you go into, say, more debt than the current GDP or whatever, what you're doing is you're signing some kind of contract that says, your children will be, you're purchasing their children as slaves. Although they would have still been born into a system where they would have been slaves, but they're at some greater percentage of slavery than you, probably, I would think, if you're going above the current GDP. So you're selling you're selling yourself into slavery, and you're selling your neighbors into slavery, but you're also selling the future generations into slavery, supposedly even at a greater rate. And of course, you're consuming whatever productive activity is going on as well as you go into more debt. As you see that, I'm not sure of the granular details, but my thinking is that it's either that, what I've been saying, but also I think the debt, if you're going into debt yourself, this is getting onto the topic of going into debt yourself rather than what is just the dollar. What does it mean to really go into debt for yourself? If, say, you can just keep printing more and more money, right? So what does it really mean to be going into debt at that sort of collective level? People always talk about, oh, the debt. It's so bad that we have the debt. We got to pay it off. Why? Do you understand what the debt is? I don't think so. I don't think I understood what the debt really was. I knew it wasn't good because it meant you were, but I can you really put it in sort of different terms to understand what the debt is really measuring, happening, sort of operationally or physically? I think what it's an indicator sort of how much lost productive opportunity has occurred. I think that's what it's really a measurement of. It's sort of it's an indicator of what could have been, and it's not just what could have been was at least that much, and you're measuring it in dollars. So it's sort of like saying we spent at least this much time measured in dollars running in hamster wheels. as opposed to curing disease XYZ, building energy source X, X whatever, building skyscrapers X whatever beyond what we have currently done. We would have had at least that much had we not been in debt, not to mention what we could have achieved beyond that if we had, say, a free society, a completely whatever free society. In principle, obviously it's not perfect, but you have that intention in principle. You don't intentionally create a society to do the opposite. So I think that's what the dollar really is. That's sort of what the debt really is. And I think if you don't put what the debt really is in that kind of terms, then why should anyone care that there's some big number? And it doesn't mean anything. Even these people that complain about the debt, I don't think they have any real reason to concretize what has happened in the world that is being symbolized by that debt. Because as I said, what is a debt that you owe yourself? I guess you could say, like, if you sit home on a Saturday and instead of doing anything that benefits you, you've created a debt to yourself. In the same sort of way that when a society creates a debt to itself, it's a measurement of the lost opportunity cost. But you're doing it you're measuring it monetarily. And of course there's spiritual ramifications that affect the culture, so people they hate their lives, and there's physical manifestations of that because you got people suffering with diseases that aren't being cured, or people that are spending 8 hours a day in a job they don't like, or people that are spending 8 hours a day doing a job when it should only take 4 hours a day or 3 hours a day or 2 hours a day. Whatever, it's all of that. You're just measuring hamster wheels. Hamster, he's just running in a wheel, he's not doing anything. That's what the debt symbolizes. And I think that's what the dollar is as well. If it's a debt-backed currency, if you're indebted, you're born into debt, you're a slave. And the more money you have, though, you can never buy your freedom, but you can become sort of relatively speaking, you become less of a slave relative to the other people because you own more of that pie in that sense. So I think we don't want to have a currency that's backed by people, by slaves, especially not slave. I mean, maybe by people in some sense, but not slaves. But we want it should have been backed by a thing like gold or whatever, like something you could actually trade in that was out there, not buying and selling people. So that's what the dollar and that's what the debt. Think about what it means. Maybe you guys have some other idea or something similar. I think I'm probably on the right track there. All right, thanks.